Would you like to learn how to make this classic beef stroganoff from scratch in your own kitchen? Stay tuned to the next episode of Hilltop Stovetop. Hello and welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we're teaching you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. Today, we're going to be making beef stroganoff. Now, beef stroganoff sounds like it's pretty gourmet, but it's actually some pretty simple ingredients. I came across this recipe when I was looking in one of my other books, and I thought, boy, I haven't made that in a while. So I'm going to make a big batch of it. It is one of those things that I can make some and then freeze some, and it will still be pretty good warmed up. And then I started looking through all the rest of my cookbooks, and I realized that even though beef stroganoff is a Russian dish, it's certainly been embraced by the North American palate. And for all of the recipes that I found for beef stroganoff, they were amazingly similar. And often when you look at several recipes for the same kind of dish, there'll be all kinds of variations. Not with this one. It was pretty straightforward. The only variations were in the type of meat, and there was everything from using beef tenderloin to sirloin steak. What I'm using here today is just stewing beef that I have cut into small pieces. So it's going to be almost like a beef bourguignon that way, except it's a sour cream sauce instead of a red wine sauce. And I remember my grandmother making this with hamburger. So the point is that it is a beef dish with a sour cream kind of a gravy. So we're going to start off. We've got I'm using the Instant Pot today so that we can see it on the overhead. Normally you might do this in a frying pan on your stove. So we're going to start off with a couple of things. One is we've got some oil in here. And that's our basic keep it from sticking kind of oil. And then the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some butter. And actually I'm using the ghee here, the clarified butter. And that's going to help with the browning of this. Now, and we're going to melt those two together. And that's a fairly common thing, is to do a combination of oil and butter in your mixture. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be browning the meat to start with. And we're just going to do it in small batches. And this is probably the most time-consuming part of this. And so I'm going to do a little bit of this, and then we'll fast forward to after everything is all browned. But one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to take this beef and we're going to just pat it with a paper towel. And that's going to make a big difference if you get any excess moisture off of it. It will make it brown so much better. So that extra little step makes all the difference. Now, this stuff that's at the top of the pile is relatively dry, but when we get down to the bottom of the bowl there where all the juices have settled, drying it is going to make a big, big difference. So we'll just get this warmed up. And maybe for this size pot, I could maybe get away with 10 or a dozen pieces, depending on how you've got it cut. You kind of want it to be all bite-sized pieces, I'll say. So what we're going to do is we're going to let that sit there a couple of minutes, flip it over, another couple of minutes, and then we'll take that out and set the meat aside Even though it's not completely cooked through, once it's browned, then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so now as we get these browned, we're just going to set them off to the side. As we progress through this bowl, our oil and butter mixture may start to get depleted, so you can certainly add more to it. And we're just going to keep going through this. If you were doing this on your stove and you wanted to be a little more efficient, you could actually have 2 or 3 frying pans going at once to get all of this taken care of. But you'll notice that as I was finishing up one, I had the next batch dried and ready to go. So now we're just going to cut away and finish up browning this, and then I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so here we are back. We're just throwing in the last batch. Now, one thing I should mention, today's episode is kind of a special episode because this is our 50th episode. So for those of you that have been watching right from the beginning, thank you for your support. And for those of you that are new, just let you know there's a whole lot more out there that you can learn by subscribing and watching the channel. So we've got this last little batch going here. Now, as I mentioned, I am using just stewing beef for this, which is a little tougher than if I was using a fancy steak for this. So we're going to add an extra step in this. And once I've got this all browned, then I'm going to add a little bit of beef broth to the pan and deglaze it. And then I'm going to put the meat back in and put it on the pressure cooker for about 10 minutes. And that's not, if you've got a really nice cut of meat, you don't have to worry about doing that. But because we are, we're economizing here and using stewing meat, we're going to do that. So I've got about a cup of broth here, and just watch the steam come up here. Well, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But then we'll mix this up. Woo. Okay, so we'll stir this up and get all of those crusty bits off the bottom of the pot. Process known as deglazing the pot. Adds to a nice dark brown gravy. Okay. Then we're going to take all of the meat that we browned and we're going to dump that back in along with all of its juices. Put the lid on. Now this is an Instant Pot, a pressure cooker type of a thing, so this is going to speed up the process a lot. If I was doing this in a slow cooker or something, it would probably take an hour or so. But we're going to manually just do this for 10 minutes. 10 minutes under pressure, which is probably going to be about 15 minutes in total time. And then when that's done, then we'll be ready to make the rest of the sauce. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so after 10 minutes of cooking, under pressure, oh, certainly makes my glasses steam up, if nothing else. But that makes that beef in a much better situation as far as its tenderness goes. And then what we're going to do is just take this out and get ready to make that sauce. So we've got lots of juice here. And then we're going to turn our pot back on, put a little bit more butter in the bottom, and we're going to add in, I've got onion here. Some recipes call for scallions, which is a little bit milder flavor. It's a fair bit here. I am going to put the proportions in the description, but what I'm making is a bigger batch of this, so don't be led astray by what you're actually seeing on film. This is probably a double-sized batch. So we've got onions or scallions, and I've got fresh mushrooms, and we're just popping that in, and we're going to let this saute for about 5, maybe a little bit more minutes until these vegetables are starting to brown, and then we'll be ready for the next part. Okay, so our vegetables are starting to be nicely browned here. I'm going to add in a little bit of garlic. This is kind of an optional thing, but I think it goes with the flavors that we've got going here. But I didn't want to add that too early in the cooking process because we didn't want it to be overdone. Now the next thing we're going to do is I've got a couple of tablespoons of flour. Just going to sprinkle that over the vegetables. With the fat that's in here, this should incorporate quite well, but that flour is going to be what helps to thicken up our sauce. And then I'm going to add in some white wine. And this was another thing that was, I'll say, a variation in all of the recipes that I looked at. And that was whether it was white wine or red wine or sherry. There was always some kind of wine type thing in it, but there was variations to it. The other thing is we're going to add a little dash of Worcestershire sauce. And this apparently is the one thing that has changed with it being a North American recipe versus a Russian recipe, is adding that. And then we're going to add in our sour cream, and we're not going to add it all at once. We're going to add it a little bit at a time and stir that in. I'm sure real chefs don't always do that, but in an ordinary kitchen you do. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do is add some tomato paste. And those of you that were watching my video on how to make spaghetti sauce, remember that we used half of a can of tomato paste in that. And then the remainder we put into this little package and popped it in the freezer for just such a moment as this. And because we have it in this flat shape, you can just pop that in and it will melt really quite quickly. Okay, so things are coming along well here. That tomato paste is almost completely melted in there. And the last thing that I'm going to do here is add the meat back in. So we've got all the meat and all of that juice. go, and we're going to let that simmer together for a little bit while we head back over to the stove. And you'll notice that I've got water boiling over there, and that is to cook the egg noodles that go with this. Now, this is traditionally served over either rice or egg noodles. I prefer it with the noodles, so we'll pop those in the water, and in about 5 minutes, dinner will be ready. We'll see you in a few minutes. All right, so here's our stroganoff. I'm just going to turn this off because I think we're pretty much done with that. Our timer is going for our noodles. And we'll turn that off and drain these. All right. And then we'll just find ourselves a plate, which I should have done ahead of time. And in keeping with our Russian kind of theme, I'm going to take a little bit of red cabbage to go with this as my vegetable. I'm just serving it cold to go with this, but you could heat it up if you wished. Oop. And then a spoonful of this delicious stuff over the top. And there we have it, folks. Beautiful beef stroganoff made from scratch. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and here's to episode 50. And thank you for watching, and we hope you like and subscribe. And we'll see you at our next episode, where we're going to be taking some nice fresh pears and poaching them and making a little pastry shell. And you'll be surprised how easy that one is too. Bon appetit, folks. Bye-bye for now.